Hey, good evening. Another edition of ATL Prime Sports. Todd Corder here in Atlanta. Joining us from the other side of the ATL this evening, our guest, Luke Winstel, ESPN commentator for Mercer University and also host of the Luke Winstel Show. Luke, welcome to ATL Prime Sports. You're kind of in for JJ this evening, who is having a medical issue, so our thoughts and prayers go to him and his family. And we've got our famous producer from Memphis, Wayne. How you doing, as always?
Well, I got the black cap on because Texas Rangers are in a bit of a slide right now. They're, I think they're lost 6 in a row. They fell 2 to San Francisco and then lost all the ones down in Houston.
Well, that's a tough bunch there. Those teams are really good in Major League Baseball, and let's go ahead and talk some college football to start off with. But before we do that, you can get a hold of us, all of us, at ATL Prime Sports. You can get a hold of Luke Winstel on Twitter at Luke Winstel, and you can get a hold of Wayne at RWY Jr., myself at Corder Todd, and JJ at JJ Get You One. All right, we've done all the social media stuff. Let's get started with the show. Let's go to college football first, guys. I know JJ's talked about this, but I haven't had a chance, and I always like to ask different guests about this. The college overtime rule. Luke, what are your thoughts about that? You know, they must run the 2-point conversion now after a touchdown is scored when the game reaches the second overtime. Previously, it was a third. And also, if the game does reach a third overtime, teams will run alternate 2-point plays. What are your thoughts about that, Luke?
Well, it's an interesting rule. It's very creative. And for me, overtime is definitely my favorite part of sports. Always tough when you work in sports, when you're getting a lot of overtime games packed onto each other. You know that, Todd. But overtime, no matter how you cut it, especially in football, is as fun as the sport gets. And I think when you make the stakes higher, you try to shorten these games too to keep from those 6-7 overtime games that you'll see sometimes. So I like the creativity behind it. I think it's weird. It does change the game. But I'm all for giving it a shot because if you get to 2 or 3 overtimes, you've got to change something up. So I'm all for the rule. I think it'll be a lot of fun to watch.
Me, I'm old school. I don't mind seeing the National Hockey League go to 3 or 4 overtimes, and you want to see who the team who can grind it out and get that, goal that gets deflection in front of the net to win it, and then watch the players celebrate on the ice after a 3 overtime, playing 6 periods of hockey. To me, that's full of drama. I really like the NFL rule, and I don't even like the current one. I like it where it was old school. You had to kick off. You still played real football. I don't mind the part where if you kick off and somebody goes down and scores, you get the ball back. Back in the day, it was sudden death. I mean, not long ago, you scored first. That was it. The game was over. And I really didn't mind that either because, it does put the pressure on the defense, but also puts the pressure on the offense. Don't turn it over in your own end. You can lose with a field goal right away. So I'm a big fan of the sudden death rule. I'm not a big fan of going for 2 and all that, but I understand why they do it because they want to shorten the game and prevent injuries. But I'm pretty old school when it comes to that, as I'm much older than you to begin with. So that's my take on it. What is yours, Wayne?
I've got a feeling that looking back on historically how many games go to that many overtimes, it may not even come to a factor of it ever being used. And the only time I will be against it is if the team that I like loses in overtime due to that rule.
Oh, I see. So you want to use it for your own privilege and benefit. You know what? I get that. I mean, you want your team to win, so whatever it happens, but I don't really care about the rule. I just want my team to win. That's an interesting perspective. A little bit different than Luke's and a little bit different than mine. But, hey, that's all right. So, anyhow, let's move on from, let's stick with college football for a minute. The week 1 matchups are very interesting. Luke, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. To me, the best matchup for week one is not even close, is Georgia versus Clemson in Charlotte. What's your best week one matchup in college football?
I'm with you on that one. I cover on my show, the Luke Winstel Show, I do a lot of work in recruiting, and actually that's why I'm so sunburned right now. I spent all weekend at recruiting camps talking to guys, and the way that UGA and Clemson have recruited, first off, our local area, Metro Atlanta, Georgia, and gotten around the Southeast. I love the prospects and the talent those two teams have. I've seen a lot of the guys over the past few years that will be coming into starting roles for both teams. And I think that the high levels of exciting young talent for both of those teams that have been top 5 recruiting classes the past 4, 5, 6 years, I think that that to me is the most exciting because both teams have lost a lot of players to the NFL draft, but they have a lot of guys that'll come up and be very exciting, especially when you look at the skill positions for UGA at wide receiver. For Clemson, lost a lot of guys to the draft. So who's going to step up, especially at quarterback? Their quarterback prospect could be one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the country when you look at his billing and what he's done in his past. So I think that that is going to be the top matchup to watch because the winner of that will definitely move into that. Okay, probably a favorite, definitely to make the playoff, but a favorite to contend with a school like Alabama for the title.
Wayne, what's your sleeper matchup for week one? Because I mean, there's a lot of great ones: Ohio State, Minnesota, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, Alabama, Miami, Indiana, Iowa. That's an interesting one. Penn State, Wisconsin, the Raging Cajuns versus Texas. LSU is playing UCLA. Notre Dame playing Florida State. Don't know how good of a matchup that'll be. We'll see how good FSU is right away. Ole Miss versus Louisville here in Atlanta. That will be an interesting one. And Michigan State versus Northwestern. And here's another one, Wayne, under the radar. We've already talked about it before. Georgia State versus Army. Any of those your favorite, or do you have one?
Well, I'm kind of picking my the ones that I'm keeping an eye on are going to be the schools that have new head coaches. I'm interested to see how Gus Malzahn does down at Central Florida. Interested to see what the new coach at Auburn does. They play Akron, and the new coach at Tennessee, who used to be down at South Florida. I'm interested to see what goes on there.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean, Auburn should win no matter who the coach is against Akron. But right, you want to see what kind of jump start they get. My sleeper matchup, like I mentioned it, Georgia State and Army. Georgia State's got all these guys returning. We had Dave Cohen on Friday on ATL Prime Sports. You can go check that out. Their opening matchup is Army. That's a sleeper game for me. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting matchups in week one, more than usual. Seems like we get a lot of duds, but I noticed the Big Ten, they're already starting week one in conference play. Like we said, Michigan State versus Northwestern, Ohio State versus Minnesota, so on and so forth. I like that LSU is playing UCLA. Luke, is that in Pasadena in the Rose Bowl, that matchup? Do you know?
Ooh, no, I'm not sure.
And I know the Ole Miss and Louisville's here in Atlanta. I know that Alabama and Miami, I think that's a neutral matchup too. I think that's in Jerry World, but I'd have to check that. But a lot of interesting matchups for week one, that is for sure. Let's go on over to the switch over from college football over to the National Football League and talk about the Falcons. Luke, of the guys that the Falcons drafted, and they had 8 draft picks, nobody in the 7th round, 3 in the 5th, 1 in the 1st, 1 in the 2nd, 1 in the 3rd, 1 in the 4th, and 1 in the 6th. Who do you expect to start of the 8 draft picks from the Falcons?
Well, first off, I mean, Kyle Pitts will be a superstar. When you look at the new head coach, looking at Coach Arthur for Atlanta, he loves tight ends, did a really good job with Jonnu Smith in Tennessee. So we could potentially, if Hayden Hurst is still on the team, if they don't trade him, Hayden Hurst, Kyle Pitts, 2 tight end sets, that'll be a lot of fun. So that's the obvious one. Richie Grant, the safety, is somebody that, I'll be honest, pre-draft I was not very familiar with. But reading up on his draft reports, I checked back on his film after the draft. Very impressive looking safety. I expect him to if he's not starting week 1 or week 2, by midseason, I think he'll have that job. Him and Duron Harmon, who's a guy I've had on my podcast. Duron's a very strong guy for New England, nicknamed the closer for the way that he would make interceptions, big plays at the end of games. He won some Super Bowls, helped his team out in New England, 3-time Super Bowl champ. So coming to Atlanta, Harmon will be a safety, likely starter. And I think Richie Grant will contend at least by midseason to be that starter. There's going to be 2 in this class. And judging by the reaction and some of the quotes that we've gotten out of the Falcons' new coach on the offensive line, those guys that they got in round 3, Jalen Mayfield out of Michigan, and then another one I think in the 4th round, a little later. Those linemen are prospects where you say, okay, I'm not going to be able to tell you they're going to start. They're going to come out and play a lot year 1, but they've shown a lot on film, especially the lineman from Oklahoma, blanking on his name right now, that the team picked. But he's a very high upside guy. If he hadn't played 2 games this past year, I think he'd be a much higher draft pick. Let's see.
Taquan Graham out of a defensive tackle out of Texas. Is that the one that you're thinking of? And also, that was in the 5th round the Falcons had, and they also drafted the corner Darren Hall, the cornerback out of San Diego State. I'm with you, Luke. I only see 2 guys starting. I just do. Mayfield may make the team. Frank Darby's an interesting name for me out of Arizona State, the wide receiver. He's got a lot of speed in the 6th round. Not sure what's going to happen with a wide receiver position. There's a lot of talk the Falcons may trade Julio Jones after the 1st of June. The trade option is there. The money goes down. It's a lot cheaper to trade him. He can't stay on the field. He's been injured a lot. Wayne's shaking his head like, no, they're not going to do it. But it would not shock me at all if Julio Jones was traded to a team. Would it shock you, Luke?
No, it wouldn't shock me because we've been hearing so much about it. But do I think if I were to bet, I would bet that it would not happen. Now, it's not something I would bet on because it's kind of 50-50 at this point. But I would think that the way the Falcons have drafted, what they've pushed in terms of picking up guys, it feels like more of a retool than a rebuild. And I think that the team wants to remain competitive. And if you trade Julio Jones, I think it's a lot harder to remain competitive if you're Atlanta.
I agree with you a lot. It is a retool. It is not a rebuild, because if they would have drafted a quarterback, then it would have been a rebuild, but it would have made no sense at all, because Matt Ryan's got 3 years left on his contract, and he's really not tradable for 2 more. It'd be very difficult to trade him. And getting Kyle Pitts, the tight end out of Florida, he's not a great blocker, but he can stretch the field downfield and he can catch. And he's got great hands and great speed. And, they say this is the number 2 overall player in the draft. I don't know if I would have gone Kyle Pitts if I were Atlanta. I probably would have protected my big investment at quarterback in Matt Ryan and taken Sewell, the offensive tackle out of Oregon, who one NFL scout said is the only sure NFL Hall of Famer in the draft, and he ended up going to Detroit, ironically. I believe Richie Grant is a starter out of Central Florida. I agree with that. He had 10 interceptions this year. I think he will start alongside safety, along with Harmon, who played for the Lions last year and played pretty well. The Detroit chose not to re-sign him. So that's interesting. Luke, when we talk about, we go from the draft, the folks that were drafted to the undrafted free agents. One name really sticks out to me, and it's running back Javion Hawkins out of Louisville. I think he's got a chance to make Atlanta's team, Luke. The Falcons aren't deep at running back at all. They did not pick up a bell cow guy in the draft at all. And this Hawkins kid out of Louisville, he's got a shot to make it.
Yeah, I'm always interested in the undrafted free agent signings, especially because lately we've seen several of them turn out very well for teams like Atlanta. The Jacksonville Jaguars are a team that I follow as well that have picked up a good number of those guys. One other one I would say to watch first off at quarterback, I think Felipe Franks is a good candidate to be signed to the practice squad from Arkansas. I think he's an immediate candidate there. I also like undrafted receiver Austin Trammell out of Rice.
I got to watch some of his games, and I looked at him, and I'm like, okay, he could definitely, at the level he played at, dominate competition. I'm curious to see once you get into preseason games in the NFL, will he be able to continue that level of play? I feel like he's got the raw ability to do so. If he can get a little more coaching from the Falcons, he's at least a practice squad candidate, potentially on the bubble to me, depending on what happens at the top end, of course, with Julio Jones. But Hawkins out of Louisville, Power 5 guy, somebody that we've watched on TV play in the ACC a little bit. He's shown flashes, and the thing with running backs, of course, is teams are not valuing them as highly these days, which means good ones are slipping further down the board. Hawkins could be a guy for the Falcons. Of course, you haven't invested much in him, so he could be a guy that you end up taking a flyer on. You don't have Todd Gurley. You don't have Ito Smith. You do have Mike Davis to be at the top of the group, but the running back position is not even a top 3 or 4 position group, top 5 position group on the Falcons this year. Just not that strong. So Hawkins
and
could
that
sneak in.
tells me they're going to throw the ball a lot, Luke. That tells me they're going to throw the ball at least 60% plus time. And you know, on that offensive line, drafted Mayfield, I don't think he'll start right away. I agree with you. We're going to have 2 starters out of this group. And who's going to come out in the later rounds and make this club? Who knows at this point? But if you're an offensive lineman and defensive lineman, you surely have a chance to make this club. And you know, another player that was undrafted was Jack Beto, actually, or is it Bato? Batho, the 4th out of South Dakota School of Mines. Now, you're doing some serious digging, finding somebody out of South Dakota School of Mines, an offensive tackle, and Jack Baho to potentially make this club. But I doubt it.
South Dakota Mines Hard Rockers. They're
right.
Named by the way.
You know what? They'll find you. If you're out there, they'll find you. And speaking of finding people for the Falcons, you know, this player, Juwan Terrius Bryant, the defensive back out of Austin P, he thought he got a tryout from the Atlanta Falcons. He showed up at the facility on Wednesday and was turned away. And he thought he got a text from Falcons DC Dean Pease, and it was nothing but a hoax. And the Falcons turned him away. And I'm wondering, under normal circumstances, Luke, and they might have kept him in the building, but they can only have so many people in there because of COVID, which to me is ridiculous. If you got your vaccine or you've had it, you should be able to attend whether anybody else doesn't have their vaccine or not. But that's another story for another day. But I wonder if they're going to bring this Brian kid back. I don't know. I mean, something like that, did dirty joke on somebody. I'm hoping this Brian kid gets a chance with another team.
Yeah, I mean, the thing too with the pandemic protocols, to be specific there, the league mandated that teams can only have 5 tryout players this season because of the pandemic. The Falcons had already had their 5 tryouts just a few days before.
Right.
So they couldn't because of the rules. I know the Falcons are not, under Arthur Blank's leadership, of course, not a heartless organization.
No.
And the thing is, Perry's stats coming out of Austin P looked pretty solid. I mean, obviously, you look at Austin P level of competition, it's not Power 5, not SEC, but put up some good numbers and had some good tape. And because of that, he has landed an opportunity now because of the publicity that's come from this. So he will be trying out, I think it's in California, with an organization in front of some NFL scouts. So he will have a shot to prove himself. It's another opportunity for him. So maybe something good will come of it, as bad as it is for this kind of dirty
Wayne,
joke
this kid's driving all the way down, Wayne, from the Nashville, you know where Austin P is. You're from Tennessee. What is it, Clarksville area, correct? So he driving all the way down there, and he was turned away. I'm hoping the Falcons call him back.
Well, we'll see what happens. But, you know, you were talking about some other undrafted players who have a chance to, you know, get signed with teams. I think the kicker for the Memphis Tigers, Riley Patterson just got signed with the Vikings, and it looks like Brady White, who is a quarterback for Memphis, he's going to have a tryout or some kind of camp or mini camp or something with the Titans. So we'll see what happens with that.
You say that we cornerback or quarterback? I didn't hear
Quarterback.
That. Okay, speaking of quarterbacks, nice transition. Somebody else is a former quarterback. He's going to get his tryout as a tight end, maybe with the Jackson Jaguars and Urban Meyer, and that would be Tim Tebow, who knows Urban Meyer, Luke, very well, played quarterback for him at Florida, but he's going to get a shot as a tight end. And I'll tell you what, when you look at the Jaguars group of tight ends, I'm pulling for a guy like this, Luke. I really am. I'm pulling for him to make the team. And, you know, when you see the disdain from the media on this, to me, it's shameful.
Well, you know, Tim Tebow is one of those polarizing figures, and I think it is a good lesson for guys. Like over the weekend, working with a lot of recruits at one of the hot list camps in Villa Rica, Georgia, and I think it's a lesson for guys like that are coming up that, hey, you can be a good football player, but you also need to build a brand, have connections, make a positive impression on people. I feel like everybody I know that has talked to, met, spent time with Tim Tebow comes away just blown away with the personality he is. He's built a brand. He backs it up. He's got connections. He's a guy that has a dream and chases it. You can't fault him for that, but he's done a lot of things right to land this opportunity. And while it is weird that he's getting signed instead of some of the younger tight ends coming up or other guys that maybe have played football at a high level in the past decade or so.
8 years.
It just goes to show you that, yeah, exactly. There's a lot more to it sometimes for getting signed to an NFL team than just being a great football player on the field. And Tim Tebow has put together a complete package to where his old coach is willing to take a flyer on him, as funny as that is. And worst comes to worst, it's interesting PR, a lot of attention to the Jaguars team that they haven't had, as polarizing as it can be.
You know, it would be sweet music to my ears and eyes to see Trevor Lawrence's first touchdown pass on a 1-yard flip to Tim Tebow and him kneel in the end zone and pray. I mean, I don't find Tim Tebow polarizing at all, to be honest with you. You know, he's a strong Christian. He shows it. I have no problem with that. And, you know, I just don't I know you don't think he's polarizing, but there are a lot of people out there think he is polarizing because of his Christianity. And, you know, to me, that sends a bad message. I think the guy's a total class act. You know, he tried out with the Mets. He didn't do so bad in the minor leagues. You know, he hit, 225, and he had some homers and ribbies and whatnot. He started out okay. And you know, after an 8-year tryout, look, he's never played tight end. But this is something he could learn. I mean, there's a lot of former players criticizing him. And look, he's getting an opportunity from a former coach. I think it's nothing more than that. Will he make the team? Is he a long shot? Maybe he is. But when you look at the Jaguars roster, I give him a puncher's chance. Don't you, Lou?
Yeah, you know, it's fascinating because Tim Tebow is very well built. That's one of the first things I checked in on once he signed. I was like, all right, what's his muscle mass look like? Does his body have a shot to hold up at that position? And I was a little surprised. I mean, he's always been big, always had big arms, big body, but he's really been bulking lately. It's, you know, latest stuff on Instagram and social media. He looks like he has a chance at holding up. So I think that he will give himself a puncher's chance. I do not think he will make the team if I have to put in a prediction. But I do think he'll attract a lot of attention. That's one thing that, whether he intends to or not, he's very good at. And, you know, a note for you, he's been a great role model for a lot of people growing up.
He's
I know
not
my cousin
polarizing at all. I don't think he's polarizing, and I don't think you think he is either.
Well, I mean, personally, I'm like, what has he done wrong? He's Tim Tebow. He's being himself. And I think it's just the fact that people don't like the image of Tim Tebow, the way he comes across. They don't agree with it. And I say, okay, that's
I
fine,
just
but
don't
sometimes
understand
it
why.
can be a little
I
much.
don't understand.
It can be a little
I just
much
don't.
to hate on a guy, you know.
I think it's a
So
lot of much,
so I'm
not
with
a
you.
little, a lot. He's a great Christian and a great person. I think the NFL could use more people like Tim Tebow. I think it has nothing to do with Colin Kaepernick, and I can't stand the comparisons at all. Let's move on over to Aaron Rodgers. Wow, this is a different situation. The latest today is the Green Bay Packers said, hey, we're not trading Aaron Rodgers unless we get us a starting quarterback in return. Luke, my thing is with Aaron Rodgers is he may be quirky, he may be different, but the Green Bay Packers sure need him to win the Super Bowl, and they can't win him, and they can't win it without him. So if they trade him, they have this Super Bowl roster. But if they trade him if they trade Aaron Rodgers, they better get a quarterback as good as him. And there might be a handful in the NFL. They will not be a Super Bowl contender any longer. And you've got what Blake Bortles and Beck Kurt were brought into a rookie minicamp. I find that funny that Blake Bortles was brought into rookie minicamp. He's taken the Jaguars to the AFC Championship game. And then, of course, they got Jordan Love, who they drafted last year. In the first round, he never stepped on the field at all. He's inactive every week. He could be the starting quarterback in week one if they do get rid of Aaron Rodgers. To me, Luke, the Packers have got to – I agree with their head coach. They have got to bring Aaron Rodgers back. And if they trade him, they better get a top 3 quarterback. And I don't see that happening.
Well, one thing that you'll have to know about me is I'm a players guy. And
me too.
To me, the Green Bay Packers have brought this on themselves. They've not supported Aaron Rodgers. I mean, when you have a Hall of Fame quarterback on your team, you have to recognize it. And for the Falcons, for example, they've done a good job here and there. They'll get Ryan receivers, but sometimes, really, in the past 5 years, they haven't had him the offensive line since the Super Bowl year. But that's a different story. Teams have to support a quarterback when you see them as a guy that you can win a championship with, a Hall of Fame type of guy with Aaron Rodgers, for example. And you don't draft a receiver in the top few rounds for however many years. You take a quarterback instead. This year you take a cornerback. I love Eric Stokes, but Aaron Rodgers has got to have more talent around him. He's got some talent, but if you put a receiving core like the Falcons have, or you put weapons like other teams have had lately around Aaron Rodgers, and that team is not losing in the NFC Championship every year anymore. If Rodgers just had a little more support, if they didn't pick a quarterback in the first round, they wouldn't have brought this mess on themselves. I don't think Aaron's a guy that goes around, saying the grass is greener everywhere else. I think he's saying, hey, this has been going on for about a decade now. You guys have not supported me the way that you need to support a Hall of Fame quarterback, and that's why they've only got one Super Bowl.
It's amazing. Only one. I wish I had one. Most players don't even
but it's
get
Aaron
one.
Rodgers.
I know.
Aaron Rodgers should have at least two or three. Well, Aaron should have 3 at this point.
I mean, it's kind of hard to argue. I mean, he's had some great teams around him, and I don't blame Green Bay. I think it was a mistake to draft Jordan Love because they've got Aaron Rodgers, and they didn't really go get any offensive weapons last year, even though they seem to have plenty of offensive weapons around him. They didn't draft an offensive weapon this year until the 3rd round out of Clemson. So, I mean, they're going to look. I really honestly think this comes down to money with Aaron Rodgers. And if he gets a contract extension, all this stuff is going away. He's looking for more security. I believe that. And if Green Bay brings the security, I think this stuff is going to be all for naught. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that Aaron Rodgers, kind of like, again, we've been talking about the Falcons a lot. Matt Ryan in Atlanta has given you no signs really of slowing up. And some of the signs have been offensive lines. So you look at Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay and you say, okay, Tom Brady's playing until he is, at this point, it seems like Tom Brady's going to play until he's close to 50. Sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, is he ever going to stop? He's going to
Luke,
have
it
gray
goes
hair before
quick
he
though.
retires.
Look what happened to, hey, Luke, it goes quick. Look what happened to Peyton Manning. I mean, it can go quick, and he could be done at the end of next year. I don't think so, but gosh, you just never know. He's year to year to me, even though he's Tom Brady.
Yeah, Tom Brady for sure. And then, but you look at Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is not yet year to year. I think you could afford to.
I don't think
a guy
so,
like
maybe.
that. So I think,
but I mean, it's so
Aaron,
rare.
yes, right. But
Peyton
Aaron
Manning
Rodgers
wants
is
to
that
quit.
rare player. So I see
Right.
it there.
I agree
giving
with
him
you.
an
I
extension.
do.
Okay, he wants it. Maybe we should extend Aaron because he is our Hall of Fame quarterback. Let's treat him like one.
Well, I look, if they extend him, this all goes away and Aaron's happy. He can still play. He can still host Jeopardy in the off season, which I think would be really cool. We're out of time this evening. That's the end of the show. I want to thank Luke Winstel for being our guest this evening. Our thoughts and prayers go to JJ, who has a medical issue. Hopefully, he'll be back on the next ATM Prime sports show live at 1:00 Eastern Standard Time Friday afternoon on blogtalkradio.com or 1-347-205-9631. Once again, Luke, thanks so much. I know you're an excellent ESPN commentator for Mercer University, and you're also host of the Luke Winstel Show. Luke, tell folks out there where they can go get your podcast before we let you go.
Yeah, the podcast is available on all streaming services. If you look up Luke Winstel Show, you can find me on Spotify, iTunes, all of that. Also, it will be available on the radio in Georgia and Alabama on 4 different stations coming in August. So we'll be starting that up soon as well. So it'll be a podcast and a radio show coming for you.
You got to have me on. You got to bring me on now. There's no doubt.
That sounds good, Todd.
I would love to come on. That would be awesome. I'm looking forward to an invite. And, of course, I do have experience on the radio, so it'll feel like home to me. So, anyway, for Wayne in Memphis, for Luke Winstel on the other side of the ATL, for myself here in Atlanta, we'll talk to you Friday live at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, blogtalkradio.com. 1-347-205-9631. Have a great evening, everybody.